After my husband's funeral, I went to my nephew's first birthday party. My sister suddenly announced, "My son is from your husband. So by inheritance, I'm owed half of your $1 million house." She even showed his will. I said, I see. I barely kept myself from laughing because my husband, and before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your activity is very important to us, thank you. Now enjoy the story. A few days after my husband's funeral, I still went to my sister's son's first birthday. I was 34 then. A widow. The word sounds foreign, as if it's not about me. Andrew and I had been together for 11 years. An aneurysm tore him from my life suddenly, without warning, and everything around me became a blur. Phone calls, paperwork, voices asking something, and you nod because you have to, not because you understand anything. The party was in my sister Chloe's cramped rental apartment. Balloons, streamers, someone cutting a cake in the kitchen, children's laughter in the room, and in my head, a hum from lack of sleep and emptiness. My parents sat by the window tense, as if afraid to breathe too deeply. People exchanged glances, whispered, and I chalked it up to awkwardness. It's not every day that a woman fresh from a cemetery comes to someone else's celebration. Chloe appeared, all dressed up, with baby Luke in her arms. The child was laughing, reaching for a spoon, his cheeks warm and healthy. She barely looked at me, walked past the guests, took a glass and clinked it with a spoon to get everyone's attention. She said loudly, clearly, as if she had rehearsed it beforehand, "Thank you for coming. This year has been difficult. I've been hiding something, but I can't anymore." She placed her hand on the child's head, looked up directly at me, and said, now more quietly, but so that everyone could hear, "Luke is not Tim's son. Luke is Andrew's son." Someone gasped, someone sobbed. I felt the air get sucked out of me for a second, but not from the meaning of her words, but from the audacity, from how easily they came to her. Chloe took a folded piece of paper out of her purse, unfolded it on the table, and turned it towards the nearest people. Andrew knew everything and managed to change his will. There, in black and white, half of their house goes to my son as an inheritance. And the house is worth about $1 million. Luke and I need something to live on. She said it almost casually, like the price of a bag of potatoes. Faces turned to me, strange, familiar, wary. My mother lowered her eyes to her plate. My father straightened up, as if about to stand up and stop what had already been said. And I heard my own voice, calm, even like that of a person who has finally understood where she is. "I see." And I smiled with the corner of my lips, because laughter was already rising in my throat. And I held it back only with the adult habit of keeping a straight face where you have to. "My name is Faith." That year I turned 34, and I never thought that widowhood could be so quiet. Not screams and not tears, but a rusty creak inside when you open the door and it's empty, and a mug is not in its place because no one moves it anymore. Andrew and I met many years ago at a charity gala. From the first day, he turned out to be one of those men they call reliable. Smart, attentive, generous without showing off. He proposed on the river embankment as the sunset lay on the water like an old postcard. I remember his hands, warm and confident. Then there was our apartment in an old downtown building with a courtyard, where you could hear children playing ball in the evenings. The apartment came to us with crooked walls and high ceilings, but we pulled it through little by little, room by room. The way you pull yourself out of a difficult life, patiently, without extra words. We never had children. Doctors, tests, cues, hopes that you carefully fold each time like winter clothes in a closet, and each time you take them out as if they were new. For IVF attempts. And each one like a step you climb, as if one more step and there will be a landing, but there is no landing. The last time we drove home from the clinic, we were silent. I looked out the window. He held my hand over the armrest. And that touch was like a warm heating pad on my lower back. It doesn't take away the pain, but it helps you endure it. At home, we poured ourselves a cup of tea, sat in the kitchen for a long time, and Andrew said evenly, without drama, "We'll still live well. You and I are enough." And he said it in such a way that I believed him. Then things really got better without any showy joy. We worked, and on weekends we would walk along the waterfront, sometimes go to the sea for a week. We would come back and get back to our house, changing the wiring, sanding the frames, choosing paint not according to fashion, but according to the light. Andrew helped me with my first independent projects, brought samples, patiently sat through measurements, sometimes offered a solution that made things simpler and cheaper. And I was surprised at how much a calm head decides in this life. He knew how to be a support, not loudly, not for show, just taking on what was a struggle for me and stepping back when he saw that I was coping. The apartment gradually turned into a home. We found a craftsman who carefully restored the old doors. We put a wide table in the kitchen, the very one at which we would later wait, and rejoice and be silent. Petunias bloomed on the balcony, and on the wall in the living room, the watercolor took its place. An evening city, a warm light, a boat at the pier. A quiet picture about the fact that there is stability in the world if you light a lamp in time. And the children, we learned to live without that word in our daily planning. First it was bitter, then just even. No despair, no self-pity, just a careful revision of plans. Instead of a nursery, a study with bookshelves. Instead of a sled in the closet, suitcases. Because let's go to New England in the winter instead. I've long wanted to see the snow in an old city. And indeed we learned to choose joy within our means. Not the kind that is measured by loud events, but the kind that fits in a teapot, in fresh bed linen, in a conversation in the kitchen under the clock. Chloe was always around in those years, as always, sometimes closer, sometimes disappearing for months, then calling again with a sigh, with a request, with promises to start all over again. My parents pitied her, and I tried to keep my distance, so that neither she nor the wind in her head would destroy our carefully assembled order. Andrew and I didn't argue about her then. Everyone in a family has a person you keep at arm's length. Otherwise you can't stand on your own. It seemed to me that life had finally gotten on track. Work, home, rare trips, evenings when you can hear the children playing ball in the courtyard, and it doesn't hurt. And it is at such moments, when everything has leveled out and is breathing quietly, that life is arranged in such a way that a pebble will inevitably hit the glass. About how it flew in the next part. Chloe always lived on a short leash, quickly flaring up, quickly cooling down, promising to start on Monday and postponing that Monday from month to month. Then Tim appeared. He worked in a bar, had tattoos on his forearms, a motorcycle that made our parents wince as if from a draft. They would have fights over nothing, then passionate reconciliations, the kind after which they would slam doors loudly, and just as loudly swear that now everything would be different. I stayed away. Other people's passions are like a strong spice. A little more than the norm, and the whole soup is bitter. Chloe announced her pregnancy at an ordinary family dinner in late autumn. No solemnity, just all of us at the table. A platter of potatoes, Mom's favorite embroidered napkin. And suddenly tears, trembling lips, her hands on her stomach. The words came out as if she herself didn't believe them. And we were supposed to be happy. Something pricked inside me, the way an old scar pricks when the weather changes. Not envy, no, a body memory that had also dreamed. I took a deep breath, then said, "Congratulations," sincerely, and decided that I would be the aunt who helps out without any extra talk. Luke was born strong. Warm, with the surprised look of a newborn, as if he hadn't expected to see us. I came to the hospital with flowers and a blanket that I had knitted in the evenings, stitch by stitch, thought by thought, so that the baby would be soft and calm. From the first days, Chloe called often. "He's crying nonstop. I can't get anything done. Can you sit with him tonight?" I sat, rocked him, sang old courtyard songs in a low voice, put the kettle on and whispered, "Breathe, Faith. It will all pass." Andrew was warm towards his nephew but kept a little distance, didn't impose himself, as if he were protecting some quiet inner order of ours. Then I explained it simply. It was still painful for both of us to touch the topic of childhood, even if it was someone else's booties on the dresser. Then came that morning that changed everything. Andrew grimaced. "My head is buzzing, but I can't miss the meeting," and smiled like a man who wasn't used to complaining. I handed him his scarf. We agreed to call each other after lunch. And the phone rang with a stranger's voice. Then everything went as if in a hospital corridor. People in identical coats, short phrases that don't warm your ears, and a silence that falls on your shoulders like a heavy coat. When I returned home, there was a thin porcelain mug in the kitchen sink. At the bottom, the light brown of unfinished mourning. And that was the only thing that seemed real that day. The funeral and the wake passed as if someone else were going through them for me. I nodded, made arrangements, brought funeral pastries, and all the time I kept catching myself listening, in case a familiar door slammed. Chloe, for all those days, would either text about Luke's fever or about the nanny who had canceled at the last minute. And she came to the farewell for a short time, like a guest whose taxi was already waiting at the entrance. I didn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the only politeness you have the strength for. The week after the funeral dragged on, viscous like cold jelly. Mom called every day, not so much to talk as to remind me that I had to live. And then it turned out that it was Luke's first birthday. I would have gladly hidden under a blanket and only come out in the spring, but Mom said her eternal family is important. Andrew would have wanted you to go. And I got up, washed the cups, gathered a gift, and went. Chloe's house, a rental on the outskirts, where the janitors know everyone by face. Inside, balloons, happy birthday banners. The kitchen smelled of sweet cream and coffee. Children were laughing in the room. The adults were whispering, as if I had brought the winter air in with me. Dad, seeing me, perked up. Mom was fiddling with a napkin, embarrassed to look up. I stood and thought how strange it is to be at a party when you have a different calendar and different dates inside you. Chloe came out, all dressed up, with a glow on her face that looked more like stage lighting than real joy. She clinked a spoon against a glass and asked for silence. And I already knew from her exhale that this wasn't going to be about candles or the child. She had a folded piece of paper in her purse, and it was because of this paper that I would soon have to hold back my laughter so hard that my cheeks would cramp. Chloe tapped the spoon against the glass, and when the noise subsided, she spoke as confidently as if she were on a stage, not in a rented apartment. She thanked everyone for the party, sighed about the difficult year, and placed her hand on Luke's head. I've been hiding this, she said, but I can't anymore. Luke is not Tim's son. Luke is Andrew's son. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out. Someone knocked over a glass. A cup clinked against a saucer. Dad straightened up. Mom stared at her napkin as if she could fall into its embroidery. Chloe didn't stop. She took a folded sheet out of her purse, unfolded it on the table, and leaned forward. Andrew knew everything. He changed his will. Half of their house to my child. By right. She said this dryly, like a sum on a receipt. A few people moved closer, started whispering. I looked at her and thought not about the words, but about how cleverly she was holding the pause in her gaze. She had rehearsed. May I? I asked calmly and held out my hand for the paper. She was taken aback for a moment, clearly expecting a scream, but got a polite request. I unfolded the sheet. A coat of arms, a seal, as if stamped from a photocopy. No registration number with a notary. The notary's last name was misspelled by one letter. The date was a Sunday. They don't have appointments on that day. The wording was from someone else's form. By right of blood, the heir. They don't write that. The signature was similar, but a stranger's. Andrew always had a short dash after the A, straight, without loops. And here was a wide arc like a schoolboy trying hard to write beautifully. I folded the sheet as neatly as it had been folded, returned it to Chloe, and said in the same even voice, "Thank you for showing me. I have to go." Her lips trembled. "That's it." "Not here," I answered. "It's Luke's party today. We'll discuss it calmly." I turned to my parents, hugged my dad, and nodded to my mom. Her eyes were wet, not from compassion, but from the fear that a scene was about to start. No one started anything. In the courtyard, it smelled of chilled cream and the wet rubber of baby carriages. I walked to my car, got in, closed the door, and exhaled as if after a long dive. The laughter came on its own, not a happy one, but the kind that comes when a lie is so clumsy and brazen. I held the steering wheel and thought, what confidence she has that everyone around her is stupider than they need to be. But the main thing wasn't even in the paper. The main thing Chloe didn't know and couldn't have known. And that main thing wasn't in her purse. It was in another place where paper can't be forged. In the morning, I would go to where our truth is kept. In the morning, I started not with phone calls, but with a trip to the place where what cannot be forged is kept. The bank manager recognized me, said quietly, "Stay strong," and led me to the viewing room. A metal box, a key, a silence in which you can hear your heart beat, and a folder packed by Andrew while he was still alive, neatly in his way. Transparent files, stickers with dates, signatures in a steady hand. On top was the notarized will. Seals, a registration number, witnesses, everything as it should be, without any crooked loops. The beneficiary me, without any reservations or by right of blood. The will was drawn up by our acquaintance, the lawyer Julian Vlasov, and this was not a piece of paper from a purse, but a document that lives in a registry, not in a chat. Under it were medical papers, a urologist's conclusion, a protocol of a varicocele surgery, and in the same period a vasectomy. The dates were 2 years before Luke's birth. In a separate file were the results of control tests a few months later. Azoospermia, a dry line that explains more than any words. We had decided not to tell anyone then. There had been too many questions before, too much sympathy from which you want to hide under a blanket. 3 people knew: Andrew, me, and the attending physician. Next to it was a thin notebook with a soft cover. Andrew didn't like pathos, but he loved order. Once, after one of our family dinners, he sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I don't want this to become a wedge between you, but I won't be silent either." Then, while I was on a long work call, Chloe had clung to him, closer than was decent, joked suggestively, and put her hand on his sleeve. He had moved away, then told me about it for the first time, and we decided not to make a big deal out of it, to write it off to wine and her eternal attraction to other people's boundaries. We didn't make a big deal, but we didn't forget either. A couple of weeks later, he brought this notebook. I'll write down everything that seems strange. Not because I love drama, but so that we're not made out to be crazy if something happens. In the notebook were dates, places, short quotes. She dropped by the office for a minute, asked me to lunch. A late-night message with a suggestive joke. She tried to hug me in the hallway. I said it wasn't right. Nothing extra. A statement of facts. Just below were printouts of Chloe's correspondence with her friend Jenna. Then I saw for the first time how easily other people's words are typed when they are not for you. If I play it right, I can get half. A friend will forge the signature just like in real life. She's rolling in gold anyway, she'll share. These phrases were enough to make my throat go dry, as if it had been swept away. Andrew had also put a letter from Julian Vlasov in this folder. I confirmed that the will was drawn up in my office. A copy is kept. The original is with the client. I am ready to confirm its legality and date. Julian is one of those who speaks calmly and rarely, but if he has said something, you can rely on it. At the bottom, under the papers, was an envelope with my last name. Andrew's handwriting, even without embellishments. I held it in my hands for a long time, as one holds a mug of hot tea to warm up but not to get burned. I opened it. My faith. If you are reading this, it means that what I didn't want to happen has happened. I would have preferred to live 100 years by your side and handle any of Chloe's antics myself, but life doesn't ask. Here is everything you need so that you are not hurt. Please don't let anyone confuse your softness with compliance. I love you. Andrew. Nothing extra. Again, as he lived, so he wrote. I put the letter back, stared at one spot for longer than usual to stop the trembling, and began to assemble a package. The will in a separate folder, the medical documents with copies, the notebook in my bag, the printouts of the correspondence under a rubber band. On the cover, I wrote in large pencil letters, "The truth." It's easier to get your head around it that way. The drive from the bank was different than the drive there. I was driving, and for the first time in several days I was breathing deeper. The sadness hadn't gone anywhere, and it couldn't. But next to it, a clarity had settled. I wouldn't have to argue in raised voices, I wouldn't have to prove the obvious. Everything had already been said by seals and numbers. At home, I put the kettle on, took our favorite heavy mug with Andrew, the one that thin porcelain wouldn't have survived, and dialed Julian's number. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was just as even as in his letter. Faith, my condolences. What happened? I briefly told him about the will from the purse, about the child from Andrew, about half the house. He listened without sighs or gasps, only clarifying the dates a couple of times. I'm expecting you tomorrow, he said. Bring everything from the safe deposit box. And one more thing, we'll need someone who knows how to dig, but does it cleanly. I'll give you a contact. I hung up, put my fingers on the warm ceramic and understood. From now on, it wasn't about emotions but about work. And if Chloe had a piece of paper from her purse, then I had a folder with the truth and people who know how to see things through to the end. I didn't know then that the person who digs would soon bring a dose of reality into my house that would make even my mother stop closing her eyes. Julian saw me without an appointment. His office was in an old mansion, dark wood, a window overlooking the courtyard. He listened in silence, only occasionally clarifying dates. I laid out the folder from the safe deposit box on the table. The will, the medical records, Andrew's notebook. Julian ran his finger over the seals, nodded. This is real. Then he took Chloe's sheet from her purse, the one she had shown at the birthday party, and he didn't even need a magnifying glass. The wording is not notarial. The date is a Sunday. The registration number is fake. The signature is a stranger's. We'll file with the Ministry of Justice. The expert examination will confirm it. But he looked at me over his glasses. The issue is not just in the papers. The issue is how you want to handle this. I answered honestly, I don't want a public scandal and I don't want revenge. But I won't let Andrew's memory be squandered either. Julian nodded. Then we act like adults. The first way is a statement about fraud and forgery. The second is a private procedure. We record the fact of the lie, demand a public retraction, plus a legal agreement that will protect you and the child. In both cases, we need facts. I would involve our man. He digs carefully, leaves no traces. He dictated a number. Frank Dolgov, a former detective. Frank arrived by noon. A stocky man with a short haircut, a jacket without any extra pockets. He greeted me as if we had known each other for 100 years. He sat down, took out a notebook. Tell me in order. I told him. The birthday, the will, the reaction of my relatives. He asked simple questions about Tim, Chloe's work, her housing, her parents, and wrote down short notes, like Andrew in his notebook. Give me a couple of days, he said as he was leaving. I'll look at her income, expenses, rent, hospitals, alimony, phone activity. I'll come back with answers. These couple of days dragged on, viscous like rain on a window pane. I lived by the clock. In the morning, a shower, tea, a couple of work calls. In the evening, a silence in which memory hummed. On the third day, Julian called himself. Come over. Frank is already here. We gathered in his conference room. Me, Julian, Frank. On the table was a thin folder with a clip. Regarding her housing, Frank began. She's 4 months behind on her rent. An eviction notice has been signed. The deadline is the end of the month. As for money, her credit cards are maxed out, and she has a couple of microloans totaling about $7,000. He turned the page. Regarding the child's health, there are documents. A heart operation in the first month of life. Part of it was covered by insurance and a quota. Paid examinations, medications, consultations, all on her. Hence the debts. I nodded. It was painful to hear, but it was explainable. Tim? I asked. Where is he? Frank shrugged. He's gone. According to the latest traces, St. Petersburg. The transfers are irregular, pennies. And he has old enforcement proceedings for alimony for another child. Drinking, a couple of reports for assault. Nothing heroic. He pushed the next printout aside. And now for your paper from the purse. Chloe's phone has long been living in the cloud. A backup copy. A paradise for a lazy detective. Here is her correspondence with Jenna, the one who opened the door. He read without savoring it. Death is of course terrible, but maybe it's my chance finally. Faith's house is worth about $1 million plus. If I play it right, I'll get half. and where to get a will. Dave will forge the signature. He knows how. He found a sample of Andrew's online. Photos from a charity gala. It will look real. And what if Faith starts to check? She's soft. We'll cry, we'll take it. She always gives in. Something creaked inside me. Not from surprise but from recognition. I had heard this tone all my life since childhood. Only before it had cost me resentments, and now an attempt to steal a house. Julian calmly folded the sheets. This is enough for the police and for a private conversation. Plus we have a real will, medical documents, Andrew's notebook. The picture is clear. I silently looked at the table. Faith, he asked gently, what do you want? I answered honestly. I want Luke to be safe and provided for. Treatment, education. I want Chloe to stop destroying things. And I want Andrew's name not to be dragged through the mud. Julian nodded. Then this is what we do. We prepare a draft agreement. A trust account in Luke's name, only for medicine and education. Expenditures with your and my consent. A public retraction of the lie. A written apology in Chloe's obligations. Psychotherapy, financial discipline, work. If she violates it, we go to the police with this set. Frank added. And we officially restrict that handsome Tim's access to the child through guardianship. The doctors and the papers will help here. I nodded. It became quiet inside. Not from joy but from clarity. Just one thing, I said. There will be no loud scenes. I'll talk to Chloe at my place. With the recording but honestly with a warning. Julian smiled with the corner of his lips. That's even better. I have a good voice recorder. In the evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with a mug, the same heavy one, and for a long time I looked at the watercolor above the table. It's amazing how a lamp above a drawing holds the light, even when it's dark in life. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Chloe, we need to talk, I said calmly. Tomorrow at 2 at my place. She was silent for a second, and I heard that same theatrical intake of breath on the line. I'll be there. I hung up, checked how the voice recorder turned on, and caught myself thinking that the house had suddenly become very quiet. As it happens before a storm when the air thickens and you know for sure it's about to strike. At 2 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Chloe was standing on the threshold, well-groomed, collected, with that same face on which it is convenient to play any role. I led her into the living room. 2 chairs opposite each other, a table between us, on it glasses of water, a folder, a voice recorder. I want to record our conversation, I said. Honestly, with your consent, so that we don't argue later about who said what. She nodded almost easily. Record it. I have nothing to hide. I turned on the voice recorder, stated the date and time, asked for her consent out loud, and waited for her yes. And I put the device aside. Tell me how you see it, I suggested. Without the theater. Chloe sighed, stared at her palm and began. As if she and Andrew had been involved 2 years ago, as if they had met several times in a hotel, as if he had complained about our marriage, had suffered greatly. And Luke was from those meetings. Her words came confidently but like sand. They hold up until you touch them. Where? I asked. Just the name of the hotel, the Metropole, she said instantly. Upper floors. The room? Do you remember what you ordered from the room? I didn't rush her, but I didn't save her either. What difference does it make? She looked away. Salads, pizza. You know, the usual. What days did you meet? I continued. Andrew had a schedule, I remember it. It varied, she answered, and her voice trembled slightly. Sometimes a Tuesday, sometimes a Thursday. Which side of the bed did he like to sleep on? I asked, now looking directly. Before a shower or after? She looked at me as if at a doctor who was asking an unnecessary question. Why is that? To understand if this is the truth or your retelling of someone else's movies, I said calmly. Let's stick to the facts. I opened the folder, put the medical report on top. A varicocele surgery, then a vasectomy. The dates, the control tests. Dry lines without emotion. 2 years before Luke's birth. I said, not raising my voice. After that, Andrew couldn't have been a father. This is confirmed by a doctor, by tests, by seals. Do you want to go together? They'll explain it to you in simple terms. Chloe turned pale, took the sheet, and superficially ran her eyes over it. This could be forged, she said stubbornly. It could, I agreed. But this is not a forgery. And the doctor will have the original, and he will come to court if necessary. I put down the second document, the real will. Here is the legal will from a notary, I continued. All the property to me, without any by right of blood, without half the house. What you showed at the birthday party was a fake. You know that. She was silent, breathing heavily, her gaze wandering. I didn't rush her. I turned over the next file. Several pages of printouts. This is your correspondence with Jenna. Dave will forge the signature. The house is worth $1 million plus. I'll get half. Faith is soft, she'll fall for the tears. Do you recognize it? Chloe closed her eyes for a second, and I held back a tremor in my voice. Andrew's diary. He wrote down how you were coming on to him, where and when. Exactly by date. Not for drama, but so that we wouldn't be made to look like fools, as in your performance. She clenched her fingers into a lock, her breathing became ragged. And finally, I added firmly, I have a choice. A statement about fraud and forgery, or a conversation here and now as adults with consequences, but without the police. Think carefully. A thick silence hung like before a storm. Chloe looked away from the papers and stared at her glass. She said hoarsely. I made a mistake. Thought, I didn't know that this. She nodded at the medical documents. I'm at the end of my rope. Eviction debts. Tim has disappeared. I was scared. And yes, I pushed it all. But Andrew. She shook her head quietly. He never touched me. Never. I didn't turn off the voice recorder, just pushed a handkerchief towards her. Listen to the conditions, I said, and you will answer yes or no on the recording. First, you publicly tell the truth that you lied about the affair with Andrew, that Luke is Tim's son, and that the will is a forgery. Second, Julian and I will set up a trust account for Luke. Only for treatment and education, access with 2 signatures. Third, you go to a psychotherapist and a financial consultant, find a stable job and stick to it. Fourth, we officially restrict Tim's access to the child, while he has a history of assault and alimony. Fifth, you sign an agreement. If you violate a single point, I go to the police with this folder. No discussion. And also, I will be involved in Luke's life not as a money donor, but as an aunt. It's important to me to see that he is okay. She was silent, then she nodded, as if her neck were wooden. This is fair, she forced out. I really didn't think that you had everything so collected. I have a folder, I answered. You have a choice. Chloe took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and looked at the voice recorder. I agree, she said clearly. I will say everything and sign everything. Just help me with housing for the first time. Luke is sick, I can't do it alone. I will help exactly as much as it will benefit the child, I said, so that there would be no ambiguity. Tomorrow at 11 at Julian's he will formalize everything. And on Saturday at 7 at my house, a dinner for the family. There you will tell the truth in front of our parents. We will confirm it on the recording now. She nodded again, this time more quickly. All right. I reached for the draft agreement that Julian had sent by email, placed it in front of her, and showed her where to sign, where to date. Her hands were trembling, the ballpoint pen was scratching the paper. And one more thing, I said when she had put the period. Say it now briefly, as it will be on Saturday. So that there won't be any, I didn't mean it that way later. Chloe straightened up, looked at me, at the folder, at the voice recorder, and the door in the hallway clicked softly. Someone had turned the key in the lock. But the click wasn't from my lock. It was the neighbor across the hall. The door slammed and the silence returned as if nothing had happened. Chloe sat opposite me, holding her glass with both hands, as if it could drown her trembling. Say it now, as you will say it in front of our parents, I reminded her. pointing to the voice recorder. She straightened up and looking not at me, but slightly above, somewhere into the void, she said, I lied. I had no affair with Andrew. Luke is Tim's son. I forged the will. I am ashamed. I nodded, and on that note we parted. We agreed to meet at Julian's the next day, and for a family dinner on Saturday. At Julian's everything was quick and to the point. He read the draft agreement aloud. We only corrected the details. A trust account in Luke's name. Treatment, medicine, examinations, then education. Expenditures under 2 signatures, mine and Julian's. A public retraction from Chloe. The wording was simple without any loopholes. Obligations. Psychotherapy at least once a week. Financial discipline. No payday loans, official employment. Regarding Tim, a statement to the guardianship authorities with the attachment of medical documents and information about his past cases. No one-on-one walks until the investigation is over. If she violates any point, we will hand over the collected materials to the police. Chloe listened like a schoolgirl with her diary on the principal's desk. She signed. Her signature was trembling, but it was hers. On Saturday, we moved the table into the living room, set the plates. Mom brought her lasagna, the very dish with which she had been patching up family cracks for many years. My parents arrived early. I explained about the recording so that there would be no arguments later. Dad nodded, Mom frowned but said nothing. When everyone was seated, I just said, Chloe, please. She stood up, looked first at the table, then at us, and said the same thing she had said in my house on the voice recorder. Without the theater. Dad turned pale, clenched his hands. Mom at first wanted to hug her, but she dropped her hands. Apparently, for the first time in many years, she understood that hugs can't cover everything. Why? Dad asked hoarsely. She's your sister. I was scared, Chloe answered. And I thought I could get away with it as always. You didn't get away with it. Mom sighed her usual. But we're a family. But I didn't let the words spread over the table like syrup. Family is not the absence of consequences. I will help Luke and be there as much as it is useful to him. But the boundaries will remain. No more save me immediately, we'll figure it out later. Dad nodded slowly, like a man who for the first time in a long time had heard not only his younger, but also his older daughter. Mom was looking at the lasagna, tracing the corners with her fork so as not to look at us. We discussed everything on the merits. The account for Luke, the therapy, the work, the guardianship for Tim. It was dry but honest. When they were leaving, Dad hugged me and said quietly, I'm proud. Mom also hugged me, but her eyes were sad. She was saying goodbye not to me, but to a picture where we were all friendly and without problems. Chloe lingered in the hallway, stopped at the door. She stammered. I've been doing stupid things for many years. I'll try. I'll do as we agreed. Do it, I said. Words are worth nothing now. Let your actions speak for you. A year later, I went out into the yard where Andrew had planted bulbs last fall. The warm earth, the first yellow gramophones reaching for the light. Andrew is not here, and this simplicity sometimes takes my breath away. But the flowers are here and they are on schedule. There is a comfort in this for those who are left. A lot has fallen into place this year. Luke's account is working without a hitch. Medicines, examinations, consultations. We report from the trust account carefully. The doctors say his heart is behaving decently, but it needs to be monitored. I take him to the park. He has learned to gasp with laughter when he sees pigeons. And every such laugh covers the longing with a transparent film through which you can breathe. Chloe, surprisingly, is sticking to the plan. She found a job as an administrator in a dental clinic. A stable schedule, a clear salary. The team is without drama. She goes to a psychologist not for a report, but for herself. Sometimes she says that for the first time she understood how long she had been living not her own life, but something that flares up quickly and burns out quickly. We are at arm's length without friendship, but also without war. It's more honest than pretending. My parents have gotten used to the new rules. Dad started to call me not only "How are you?" but also "Do you need help with anything specific?" Mom learned to say no to her younger daughter without that sigh with which she used to cancel any responsibility. I found my support not in a strong woman whom everyone admires, but in simple things. In a support group at the church on the next street, where they don't ask unnecessary questions and don't interrupt someone else's pain. In the Andrew Foundation, Julian and I launched scholarships for law students from low-income families who dream of corporate law and honest practice. In Friends Who Just Come and Know How to Be Silent in the Right Way, not with emptiness but with presence. Sometimes I meet with Michael, an ethics professor who once approached me at a foundation event to make a donation and brought not flowers, but a compact desk lamp, so that your eyes don't get tired in the office in the evenings. We go to museums, argue about books, drink tea. No promises. I still sleep on my side of the bed. And this is not loneliness, but an order where I know why I have a morning, even if it begins in silence. If there is a moral to this story, it is not that good has triumphed. Good doesn't triumph over anyone. It just does its job quietly, point by point. Documents and boundaries are also a form of kindness to oneself and to those you love. Compassion does not mean letting yourself be used. And the most difficult honesty is not to say yes out of fear, but to say no in time, even if it makes someone uncomfortable. Andrew, if you could see our yard now, you would say that the flowers are a success. They are really resilient. I breathe and move according to my plan, without jerks, without feats, with respect for what has already been and what will not be. This is not a victory and not a defeat. This is a life in which there is a place for memory, and for the future there is light. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Write in the comments how you would have acted in the main character's place. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There are even more real-life stories ahead.